Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Mike Shea and Lisa Kahn of Lisa Kruger Kahn Immigration. And we got some changes in the embassies. I know I got some good news this week and some excited stuff. So Lisa, what's finally starting to happen?
Yeah, so what's finally starting to happen is some of the embassies around the world are beginning to reopen for interviews and appointments again and issuing visas. And in particular, I think a lot of what we see is the E2 investor visa. So we are seeing some of the embassies opening now for appointments for E2s. We do a lot of work, you and I, in Central Florida with the British community and many cases out of the London embassy. So the good thing is the London embassy, that like every other embassy, pretty much was closed when COVID hit in end of March, and was still receiving applications, but they weren't being interviewed or scheduled. They're now, as of end of July, early August, really have started working through that backlog. We began getting notices that review was complete and we could make an interview on cases that we filed in February, March, April, and now through May. So that's really encouraging. They have a 3-tier system of priorities. So the first tier priority are the E2 investor cases that have been filed and have been pending. They're working through those. The tier 2 then applies really more toward the E2 employees, where someone is an executive or a manager of an E2 entity, not necessarily the principal investor. Those are kind of next in the list. And then tier 3 are E2 employees, maybe specialized knowledge professionals of an already registered E2 company. So what we're seeing is E2 investor cases being reviewed, completed, and invited for interview. The interesting thing is when we get an email saying, okay, we've reviewed the case, now log into the system and go ahead and schedule an interview. When we do that, the next available interview date shows as 2021, like August, September 2021. So at first we said, well, this is great that they're ready to interview, but it's not so great that it's going to be a whole year for the next available date. I think the system is doing that because they're trying to not overwhelm their interview schedule in the next month or so, and they're sort of releasing interviews as they're able. So in practical terms, what we then have to do is we have to just go ahead and schedule an appointment for next year. But then we send, there's an expedite mechanism where we can contact the embassy and request an expedite. And we basically just have to indicate that this is an E2 investor. We've been invited to make an interview and we'd like to schedule something in the next 2 to 3 weeks or so. Then they go ahead and expedite it, and they've been able to schedule it a couple of weeks out. The important things, when they schedule that expedite, the client needs to be ready to go. So if the client's in the US in another status, or says, well, I want to go soon, but I've got some things going on the next 2 weeks, or I'm traveling, we need to make sure when we schedule that appointment, they are ready to go to the embassy. And of course, as with everything, you learn the hard way, where we scheduled an appointment and we had an interview 4 or 5 days later. And then the client said, oh, well, I don't happen to be in the UK right now. I'm traveling in the islands. And okay, great. So then we have to go back to the embassy and reschedule, and it doesn't look good for anybody.
Yeah.
But the great news is we're getting the interviews, and the embassy is very mindful of social distancing, the whole COVID situation. So much like everywhere else, clients have to wear masks. They have less people in the embassy, but it's making it more efficient. There's not big crowds in the embassy, long waits. So that's a good thing. Things seem to be moving a little bit more efficiently once somebody goes in for the interview. The other aspect that we're seeing now that's important to note is that we have a current travel ban in place for individuals in the UK to come to the US, as well as the Schengen area countries, which is most of the European countries, and then Brazil and China are included in that. So in practical terms, if someone says, okay, well, I've just gotten an E2 visa, it's in my passport now, but there's a ban on me entering the US because I've been in the UK. How do we work around that ban? There's something called a national interest exception that the embassy can grant on the basis that it's important for the individual to come to the US, they're creating jobs, investing, etc. And so what's been happening is when the embassy approves the E2 visa, they're automatically kind of granting that national interest exception without a separate application or really having to request it, which is good. They put an annotation onto the visa that says something like NIE issued single entry. So they're only granting that exception for one entry and it's typically only good for 30 days. They automatically notify Customs and Border Protection, so it's supposed to be in the Customs and Border Protection system. But when the individual gets the visa back, there is an annotation on the visa, and then a separate piece of paper too that just says, you know, we've notified the appropriate authorities, but you might want to carry this piece of paper with you. And again, important too to note that they're really only granting it for about 30 days, I think from the date of the interview, not the date that somebody gets the passport back in their hand.
Right, so hurry up.
So they do have to be, once they get the visa, they can't dilly-dally and say, well, I'm coming over in a couple of months to close on the business. They've got to get over within that 30-day time frame.
Yeah,
So that's kind of what we're seeing at the moment at the embassy. I don't have a really good read on the processing time for, say, a new case. So if we submit a case this week, is it going to be a month, 2 months? That I'm still trying to, you know, assess based on what we filed, say, in like June or July. But I would say expect a couple of months on any case, you know, across.
And there was some chatter about a bridge, like I heard some chatter that they were going to establish a bridge between Heathrow and New York, like a single entry point. You know, everybody could come.
I hadn't heard anything about that.
Yeah, that was about 2 weeks ago. There was some chat board, you know, discussion. There was some stuff in the news where it was on the table. They were going to, in order to control entry and do proper assessments and get some money flowing, as opposed to doing the NEI, you know, or NIE, you know, for everybody, you know, tied to the visa, was, hey, if we can control point of entry and do testing there and lock people down if they're, you know, positive, then we'll just run it through one airport.
Gotcha.
But
okay,
there was nothing on that front. And then yesterday I got the, you know, hey, we got it with an NEI, you know, on a gate, you know, an appointment. And I'm like, okay, well, how are we doing with the travel ban? And like, yeah, we got the NIE. And I'm like, oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
So we got some movement, and people need to know that's what's going to happen. Are we hearing, what about the other countries, Belgium, France? I mean, we seeing anything?
So my understanding is France, I believe France and Switzerland, I believe, are doing the same thing, that they're back up with appointments and also kind of automatically granting the national interest exception. I don't know for sure about Belgium. I haven't filed anything there recently, but I can find out. Toronto, I'm filing a case this week with Toronto, but I had heard that they're back up as well.
They have very few cases in Canada, from what I understand. They have very few COVID cases. So that I'm hearing that the COVID cases is what's driving the behaviors of in the country of origin, is what's driving the ability of the embassy 100%. To open and run.
So there are some countries that are not issuing any non-immigrant visas right now at all, unless it's an emergent, truly emergent type of a situation, or someone who's coming to the U.S. to work on behalf of a vaccine, that sort of thing. Countries like Peru, you know, and they have a terrible COVID situation right now, and there are quite a few embassies. Australia too is not really issuing visas right now. So a lot of it depends on the local requirements and how each country is handling COVID, and some are you know, much stricter in what they're permitting, and so it has an impact on the embassies. It's been a challenge for sure, you know, as immigration attorneys and brokers, because every day the situation is fluid. Every day things potentially are changing, and staying on top of what's going on around the entire world is not so easy. But the good news is most of the European countries where we tend to do a lot of the E2s, as well as Canada, are opening back up again. I guess everything is subject to change. If there's some, you know, spikes or problems.
Yeah, knock on wood, right? But hey, there weren't any there was no caseload spike. There was no caseload spike from Labor Day weekend. Then we had football start. So I think we're back to some semblance of normalcy.
I sure hope so. It seems to be that way. It does seem to be that way.
Okay, well, I'm going to get this out to everybody. Appreciate it.
Sure.
How can everybody get a hold of you?
You can get a hold of me via email. Is a great way to reach me. My email is lisa@lisavisa.com, and my website is lisavisa.com. There's also, you go to the website directly, you can email me from that.
Okay. Thank you.